Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
That was the question that helped Ronald Reagan get elected, but it's the question that could decide the next election. And for many young people across the country, the answer may be no. A new Pew Research poll finds that nearly 60% of parents with kids ages 18 to 29 say they've given their kids some financial help in the last year. And since the 80s, the number of young men and women ages 25 to 29 still living in their parents' home has jumped by more than 10%. Here to discuss, John Della Volpe, Director of Polling at Harvard Kennedy's Institute of Politics, Joel Stein, Time magazine writer, author of the new book, In Defense of Elitism, and a man who does live at home with his mom and dad, and editor-at-large of The Bulwark, Charlie Sykes. I'm making that up about Joel, but wouldn't that be great if I had him here for that reason? John, You were just in New Hampshire talking to young voters. What did you find?
It was an incredible experience. I was with 10 of our students from Harvard, and I'm not sure what was more interesting, me talking to young voters or me watching the responses of our students listening to young voters.
And what'd you learn?
We found that almost to a person, whether young Democrats or young Republicans, they are saddled with tens of thousands of dollars of student debt. They think that their life is heading in the right direction. I said, personally, which track are you on, right track or wrong track? Most everyone said, right track. They're seeing little progress in their jobs, in other parts of their life, but they can't get out of this debt. They're moving back home. It's right track, but it's a slow train, stop by stop by stop, trying to kind of get out of this incredible amount of debt.
Joel, you traveled around the country for your book. What did you hear? What did you learn?
First of all, my parents give me my own room. I rarely see them. We have different hours, so it's not a big deal.
Okay, fine. Twin-size bed is tough the older you get, though, just saying.
It's very warm. So I found that people, so for this book, In Defense of Elitism, I traveled to the county in America which had the highest percentage of Trump voters. And what I found was that people there weren't really voting in their own economic interests. They were voting to try and keep the country the way they hoped it would be. And what they really wanted to bring us back to 1980-something. This was a very Christian, very white town. And what they noticed is that you notice your acceleration more than you notice your speed. And
what does that mean?
It means that white Christians are still the most powerful group in America by far, but they have less power than they used to, and it's an existential crisis for them, and they are freaking out. And that's why they voted for Donald Trump. Because they hate people like me, because they hate elites, and honestly you. Definitely him.
John, it's no surprise young voters tend to like progressive candidates. That's been since the dawn of time. But specifically now, who and what are they excited about? And are they more enthused than, let's say, previous elections?
They are more enthused to vote than previous elections. And what's so unique about New Hampshire is, they won't make up their mind until the final days. They want to meet every single candidate before they make up their mind, right? It's that close. But we're finding actually this degree of pragmatism that is, I think, a new conversation that's happening. And I think the cultural moment out of the last debate is when Elizabeth Warren was challenged about the cost of her policies. Young voters understand that, especially the Democrats that we spoke to, that they want solutions to health care, to climate, to school debt, college affordability, et cetera. But they want to know how much it costs, how much are they going to have to pay, and what's going to do to the federal deficit, et cetera. So there's this interested in center-left policies, but also far-left progressive policies, and we'll see where things go. They're essentially trapped, though. They're trapped by the system. They're trapped in their homes. I think the one word that describes my experience in New Hampshire is these young folks feel trapped. There's this one compelling story, a young teacher. We spoke a lot about education. She says her American dream is to be able to do what she loves, be a teacher, and to find an apartment, to find a place to live where she doesn't have to find 5 random roommates from the internet to afford an apartment.
Wait till they're married with a bunch of kids. There you know what trap feels like. Charlie, Marquette University is out with a new poll focused on your home state of Wisconsin. In hypothetical matchups, Biden beats Trump by 6 points. Sanders and Warren have slight lead. Buttigieg loses by 2 points. That's very different from the national poll. So help me understand Wisconsin.
Well, we're the new Ohio. It's going to be the battleground. This is a quick reminder that this election is not going to be decided by the national polls. It'll be decided by which candidate gets to 270 electoral votes. And so you're going to be talking a lot about Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And it's going to be more competitive in those states. And they are going to be microcosms of this election. And at some point when we shift from the primary campaign to the general election, I think that the Democrats really have to ask themselves every single time they debate these issues, how does this play in Wisconsin? How does it play in Ohio? How does it play in Michigan and Pennsylvania? Because it doesn't matter whether you get 80% of the vote in Berkeley or you win, Vermont by 60%. You have to win states like this. And Wisconsin's going to be very competitive.
Joel, the knock in the last election or on Hillary Clinton is that she didn't go to those counties. She didn't touch those forgotten Americans. But if what that Trump county is looking for is that white America with the dad who goes to work and the wife who makes a cherry pie, the son playing football and the daughter who's a cheerleader, is it worth even going there? Because they're looking for an America the Democrats are not.
I think it was hard for her as a candidate because she represented Davos and Wall Street and like people like us, whereas Trump represented like beating up people like us, which is much more appealing.
Except that's what he said when he ran. But if you actually look at the policies in the last 4 years, they only exacerbate the problems for those voters.
Yeah, but it's more about like taking down the media, taking down academia, taking down expertise and operating from the gut and being a strong man. And that's the part that scares me. That's why I wrote this book. Because I thought, like if we ever got into a populist rage in America, there would have been an economic collapse or a war or Ebola. But instead, like things were going pretty well and we freaked out. And I just want people to calm down for a second and realize what they're throwing away.
I think the reaction on the right among young people, now there are far fewer young Republicans and young Democrats, but the young Republicans I spoke to, they are fired up. And rather than fighting an economic war on inequality, they're choosing to fight a cultural war. When I asked young people, what is great about America, what makes them optimistic, they talked about our civil liberties and not losing those to what they would consider to be far-left, extremist Democrat candidates. These young people I'm talking to today, they're not the children of 9/11, the children of Fox News. And their first political impression, when I asked them, almost to a person, was seeing their parents upset during the 2008 election. Mom was really excited that Obama won, and the dad was pouting for the rest of the weekend. So this is the era of this. Again, it's a small portion, but it's about a third or so of the youth electorate, and it's a culture war that's coming back.
But Charles, are we really going to launch a culture war over a Fox News false narrative? The truth is, the world is still being run and dominated by white guys. And your son isn't going to not get into college because a diversity candidate, and he's not going to be, your son isn't going to find himself in a legal quagmire if he asks the wrong girl out on a date. This is a false narrative that's really going to cause a culture war. Give me a break.
Yes, it is a false narrative, but we are in a culture war. That is exactly right. A lot of these issues are part of this cultural narrative, and I think that we need to recognize that and how that plays out. And Donald Trump does play to that anxiety, which is, who loves America, who wants to destroy America, who loves God, who hates God. But, you started off this segment by playing that cut from Ronald Reagan in 1980, Are You Better Off 4 years, than you were 4 years ago? And I remember what the mood was in the late 1970s, and it was this sense of anxiety, this lack of faith and confidence in the future, all of that uncertainty. And I think that's what you're picking up, that a lot of young people right now are, will they be better off than their parents? What does the future hold? Is America going to be more prosperous, more, more inclusive, 20 years from now, 10 years from now than it has been in the past? And I'm not sure that that's what they're getting. What I get is this real sense of anxiety, the real sense of cultural dislocation. And I think that's going to be a big dynamic. So, in 1980, it was, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Next year, it's going to be, can you take 4 more years of this?
We're in a cultural war. Like, the things men did 10 years ago that were horrifying, they got away with. They don't anymore. That's a radical change. And there are a lot of straight guys in this country who are really angry about that.
I'm so sorry that they can't spank a female's butt at work, but giving up privilege doesn't mean you're going to lose an opportunity. It means recognize your privilege and build a bigger table.
People don't love to hear that they should recognize their privilege. That it's just not. I wouldn't run with that campaign.
I think that
people in Wisconsin do not feel privileged. Just keep that in mind.
Right.
Even if they are, they're slightly less privileged than they are before, and that's enough to infuriate them.
And I think that the young Republicans I talk to, they're not thinking through all of these issues, right? They're finding the avatar, which is Trump, and they're using kind of their own local circumstances to move into that essentially that bucket, right? They're concerned about losing their guns to far left communists. That's the way in which they describe the Democratic candidates. I said, you have $100,000 in debt. Every single Democratic candidate has a different plan to relieve you of that debt so you can invest it in a home, your family, vacation, whatever you want to do. They don't believe it. They don't even want to hear it.
Charlie, you bring up a good point. People don't feel privileged. I completely understand that. But going back to a cultural situation from years ago isn't going to make those people's schools better or their job opportunities better.
No, I get that point, but again, when we talk about a cultural war, what they don't feel privileged, they feel despised, they feel ignored, you know. And I'm not carrying water for them, but I do think that at some point, this is what we have to do: is you have to actually listen to what they are saying. And you know, Wisconsinites, I mean, these are the salt of the earth. You know, they're not sitting around saying, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump because I can't spank, you know, a woman anymore. What they want is they want to be sure that their values at least are respected. And I think that when you talk to them in that particular way, you can say, look, you know, do you really want to support Donald Trump because you are fundamentally fair and decent people? And I think that's an important message.
Well, then if we can all be more neighborly and respectful and listen to everyone around us, then maybe we could progress. Thank you all so much. Really important conversation.
I'm anti-spanking. Let me just be clear. I feel like I'm pro-elite, anti-spanking.
All right, we want to make sure we have that on the record. It's part of Joel living at home.